following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to Gate City Chronicles. I'm Kevin Avard, your host, and today I am joined with Marianne O'Connor, and you're the author of Haunted Hikes.
Yes, I am.
And we've had you on the show before.
I've been on the show before
Yeah,
a little while ago.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, now we've got the book, and as I was going through the book, I was noticing that there's little ghosts, and there's more ghosts, and it has to do with trails and haunted trails, and
yeah, that's something different. That my book was a little bit unique or different than a lot of the other haunted books that are out there, and there are quite a few books. The areas that are covered in Haunted Hikes of New Hampshire are outside areas, so they're all accessible to anyone in the public who wants to go there. Some of them are conservation areas, some of them are AMC trails that are maintained by the AMC, or they're AMC lodges on top of mountains.
AMC is?
Appalachian Mountain Club.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, these are documented haunted trails?
Well, believe it or not, there's been a lot of research delved into it, and I came across haunted stories on the mountains just because I've always been a hiker. My dad brought me hiking when I was a teenager. He didn't include me for a long period of time. I competed with two brothers who always got to go on the camping and the hiking trips, and I was always the only girl in the family, and I was left out, and I was just so extremely jealous. And one day my father said, well, you can join us. I was about 14, and we hiked up North and South Hancock Mountain, which are two 4,000 footers, and it's about a 10.5-mile journey. And my father said to me, if you make one complaint, you will never be asked to come again. And so I kind of suffered in silence, but I knew I was really hooked, and I'd always gone along ever since. And then I always heard these stories, especially in the AMC, on the lodges. They would embellish these stories of the ghost of Red Mac or the ghost of George at the Lakes of the Clouds hut. And I assumed that these stories were already collected in some type of put together research, and I found out that there wasn't. So I started putting together the stories myself and researching and mostly contacting historical societies. And that's where I got most of my documented information, as well as talking to individuals who had these encounters. So that's where the stories come from.
Now, some of these stories have one ghost or two ghosts. So, if you want to go to a really haunted place, or this is rated R, this is rated...
Well, the ghost rating is actually in terms of difficulty of the hike.
Oh.
Not so much the spookiness of the ghosts that you'll find there. Yeah. So a 1 or a 2 ghosty rating is easy. And we have one right close by. It's called Monson Village. And it's an area, it's a conservation area that overlaps parts of Milford and Hollis, and is considered to be one of New Hampshire's ghost towns.
Interesting. Now, you had to have gone to these places.
Yep, many times.
Now, have you been spooked?
Everyone, that's the question on everybody's lips. Everybody asks that no matter where I go. And what I always will say is you have to approach things with an open mind, which I do. And I was covering a story for Hippo News. I write for Hippo News sometimes. And the story was not even related to Haunted Hikes of New Hampshire. It just coincidentally happened at the same time I was doing research. and it was Black History Month, February of 2007. And I was researching 2 mountains in New Hampshire that were named after black slaves. And that's unusual. You don't hear a lot of that. So I contacted the New Hampshire Historical Society. Coit Mountain, as well as Mount Caesar in Swansea, are both named after black slaves, or freed slaves, I should say. And I was just really researching the black history aspect of that, but decided I would visit these mountains and take pictures, and it was remarkable, I thought. And while I was on Coit Mountain, there was a football game going on at Newport High School, which was where, it's kind of like Mines Falls, where the trails are accessed from the high school.
Right, okay, I see.
So I'm parked, and there's a zillion people at this football game. It was in January, and I was the only person on the trail, and I was with my dog, and we kept seeing somebody running by. And I thought, oh, well, there's somebody I can talk to about this trail. I want to hear more. But I never really intercepted this person. It was wintertime, so there were no leaves on the trees you could really see through the woods. And I kept thinking, where is that guy? I know I saw him running. I'm bound to bump into him, but I just never did. The next day, I called the town offices, much like in Nashua, the town of Newport has a trail maintenance system, like as in Mine Falls. And I spoke to PJ Lovely. He was the town park rec coordinator. And I said, PJ, you have wonderful trails on Coit Mountain. I loved it. I had a great time. By the way, I'm doing some research on haunted mountains and haunted hikes. Anything particularly haunted about Coit Mountain? And there was dead silence. And he said, it's funny you should ask that question, because the story of Coit Mountain is that the freed slave who stayed there, who lived on that mountain, was chased off that mountain many times by the people in town who didn't want him there. Oh. He had a common law wife who was white, and
it was taboo back then for sure, right?
Although much of the community did accept it, there were some that didn't, and they didn't want to. They weren't welcoming of him, and they planted some items, some farm equipment on his property on the mountain, and accused him of stealing it. And he was whipped. And part of the story goes is that his common law wife stood by him while he received 37 lashings, and she had a bowl of rum, and each time he was lashed, she took a sponge and bathed his wounds in the rum, and when the lashing was finished, she drank the bowl of rum, all to people's horror. And it was shortly after that that he was really run out of town, and there's really no way to track what became of him or where he ended up. Right. But the legend lived on that he was a phantom, that he became some sort of phantom that ran after people who might be on his property. So
interesting.
So I may have seen the phantom of Coit Mountain, but I'm not sure.
You know, it's funny, since you've been on the show, a lot of shows have sprung up. You have Ghost Adventures. You have Black Sabbath's son there. What's his name?
Jack.
What's his last name?
Jack Osborne.
Osborne, right.
Osborne,
He's doing it now.
Yeah.
You have Sasquatch people there are all kinds of these new realities where people are, there's a Squatch out there.
Yeah, well, I have a Sasquatch story in there.
Yeah, I noticed that's why I brought that up.
Yep.
In New Hampshire?
It sounds so far-fetched, and honest to goodness, when I was putting together the book, I wanted like legit stories. I didn't want any crackpot stories. And I got a call from North Conway's son. Ed Parsons is a journalist up there, and he contacted me. I spent a lot of time up there. He said, Marianne, I have a story for you. You have to use it. A friend of mine, Peter Samuelson, saw a Sasquatch. Yeah. And I'm going, yeah.
Did he get any hair samples? Come on.
Right. I go, okay, about that Sasquatch story. And I was very reluctant to take it. I thought, oh gosh, that is just going to be the story that just, puts me over the edge. And I was so glad that I did that story, because I talked to Peter. I did my own Bigfoot investigation, went out to where he saw this Sasquatch, and I'm not kidding you, a friend of and I found a footprint this big. I took a picture of it.
Only one?
There were two footprints side by side in the mud, but the second footprint, whatever creature stepped on it, slid in the mud, so it was smeared. And it was kind of this remarkable thing we saw. We said, oh my gosh, because we were bushwhacking. There's no trails to the point where Peter saw the Sasquatch. But there have been a number of investigations by, there's a Bigfoot research organization, and they've been up to the Mount Chocorua area checking for Bigfoot. And it's just, it's fascinating. There's been a number of stories.
You know, there's stories, you know, there's smoke, there's I love the shows. I love the History Channel, Ancient Alien Historians. And I mean, I take everything with a grain of salt. The UFOs, I watch Sasquatch. You know, I know all the drill now. I know how to find one if I'm looking.
I'm gonna do that. I want to find one.
I watch I know how to hunt for one. The Ghost Adventures, all of them. They're fascinating to watch, and they've got me convinced they believe it. I do believe, you know, I believe in God, and I do believe that there are spirits on this earth, and I don't think they're necessarily benevolent. I think they're malevolent, and especially the dark ones. You know? And whether it's that or an evil jinn, or there's some weird stuff out there that
there's some unexplainable
it's in a different
stuff.
spectrum.
Yeah,
you know?
there's some unexplainable stuff, and I would never, in my wildest dreams, want to provoke any malevolent type of entity or being. For me, it's a positive, or it's some way that we are able to access a different plane of the world, and we may not ever completely understand it. I don't know if we were meant to.
Well, yeah, maybe not, but you know, there's you know, something's out there, and you can't deny it. I mean, there's enough evidence to say, you know, geez, what is that?
Right.
You know, you got these full spectrum cameras now that they can show things happening.
Right, and technology, I think that's where we've seen all of these advancements. And you see a lot of these programs springing up because there's a do-it-yourself attitude and accessibility to technology that wasn't there before. It wasn't even there, I think, 10 years ago to common, normal, everyday citizens or people who want to become involved. So in a way, you have to be cautious, you know.
The growls. I don't want to hear a growl. Especially, you know, if I walk into a place, if I hear a growl, I don't want to hear a growl. When I was a kid, I used to clean a church in Litchfield. And it was Tabernacle Baptist Church. And I remember one time I was cleaning the church. It was nighttime. I had all the lights on. Actually, the pastor was preaching on demonology and, you know, be careful and you know.
So that got you a little
bit,
you know?
I'm already,
yeah,
you know,
right.
I'm already, you know, worried. So I turn on all the lights like a real big chicken. And I'm walking through the building and I'm cleaning, and I noticed the lights downstairs were all shut off. Hello? So I turned them all back on. I walked upstairs. All those lights were off. So I turn them all back on. I go downstairs, they're back off again. All right, is somebody playing, you know, I thought somebody was making fun with me. I run out to the parking lot. There isn't a soul around. And if you know 102, it was kind of dead back then. And then I started walking through the halls, and my hair is on the back of my head. I was spooking myself out. I ran out of that building so fast, right? This is a church.
Right.
And I jumped in my car, and I came back early in the morning when it was light out. I was so afraid. But, you know, they talk about that same spooky hair on the back of the feeling, you know, like, what's going on here? Is there something more to that?
I think sometimes there is, and I would never put it out there that I'm a medium or any kind of clairvoyant. I've always looked at the spiritual world as shadows of time, really. They're history, and I like to think that we keep these places, these unique, beautiful places, alive by remembering the history or why they were so important in the first place. And I do believe that sometimes there's a spiritual attachment to places, and that's maybe what is happening for whatever reason. There's a lingering on of a soul for some unexplainable reason, but if it helps to really for us to remember those places and preserve them and share the stories with other generations, I think that that's what it was meant to be.
Right.
Almost like fate in a way.
Now, you've done a lot of hikes, and one of the hazards of hiking is Lyme disease.
Yes, it is.
And that's something that you've had to, face on a personal level.
Yep, on a very personal level. Lyme disease has affected my family, and 10 years ago in 2004, my Aunt Helene O'Connor, she was a professor at NYU and then later taught at UMass Lowell when she moved to New Hampshire. She was also diagnosed with Lyme disease back then, and it was mysterious for us. We didn't really know a whole lot of what this was, only to watch her just really deteriorate in her health. She was diagnosed in the early 2000s, and she died in 2004 from complications of Lyme disease. She had an accident. She had hip replacement surgery, and she fell down the stairs actually and was killed, broke her neck.
Sorry.
Yep. But since then, it's become more public awareness about what Lyme disease is, although it's still very controversial in nature. And that's one of the things that you'll hear tied in with Lyme disease is that in the medical community, it's still very complicated. It's not accepted as a chronic long-term disease by many physicians, but a lot of that is starting to change.
Hall & Oates, you actually met Daryl Hall?
I have spoken to him on Facebook, and
he's canceled concerts because of it.
yeah, he's been very sick. I first found out he had Lyme disease. He was on the Howard Stern show, of all things, and he was talking about it. And I thought, oh my gosh, other celebrities that believed may have had Lyme disease but were undiagnosed Lyme disease. One is Bernie Mac.
Oh, no.
Yep, Bernie Mac.
He recently passed.
Yeah, the condition that he had was a co-infection of an inflamed heart that led to his death. So that is how I became aware that I probably had Lyme disease. Was I had a co-infection of Lyme disease. I had cat scratch fever, and I was in the hospital for a long time in 2012, and my illness just never went away. It just took on a different form, and I continued to be sick and get infections, and if somebody was around me sick, I would wind up getting sick. So it took a while until I was finally diagnosed, and I found out, sort of the hard way, as many people do, that a lot of the testing that most hospitals or family practices use, and this is all tied in with insurance, we are not able to access the best testing. And so you have to step outside of the normal medical practice.
That's going to change, I think, even more as things go on.
It most definitely
now,
will.
You're all over the state. You're dealing with this. You got the book. There was a recent event at a Unitarian church with a walk across New Hampshire.
Yeah, yes, I got involved with New Hampshire Rebellion. I found out that Harvard law professor Larry Lessig and a friend of his, Hedrick Smith, who's now become a friend of mine, he's a Pulitzer winner and an Emmy winner for Frontline. They are part of a cause to walk across New Hampshire starting January 11th, which was Aaron Schwartz's, I think it was either his birthday, I think it was his birthday or the day that he may have died. But the walk across New Hampshire was 185 miles. I did about 3 of those miles.
It's getting a little cold out there.
It was very cold, but for me, walking and hiking is associated with something I've done all my life, and it introduced me to so many people and friends, including Carl Hindy and Greg Hindy. And Greg Hindy is...
We had him on the show.
Yeah.
He's doing well.
He's doing great. I check in with those guys. So the book has really brought me to people who use walking or hiking as an expressive mode.
My son's doing this all the time. He's in Jamaica right now as we talk, but his goal is to hike every mountain in New Hampshire. He was when he was in Afghanistan, he was hiking, doing the mountains, and I think it's very therapeutic for him.
It's always therapeutic for me. I always find my peace and solace in the mountains when I'm troubled or down. Even now, being sick, I would never put myself away from the mountains. In terms of Lyme disease, it's something we have to prevent. It is a preventable disease,
Yeah.
and that's what we hope to try to bring awareness to, is that people need to look for ticks and they need to know the signs and
Right.
get tested and insist on good testing.
I have a friend who actually had it, and he overcame it.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually has a show here on, occasionally comes here and does a Nashua Geographic. He documents the birds of Hollis Crossing, and it's kind of interesting.
That's great.
But he's actually come through, and he's 82 years old, so there's hope.
I know that there's hope, and
Right.
in the earlier that it's caught, in my situation, I'm on some good antibiotics. I'll be on antibiotics for a long term.
Mm-hmm.
I've been on them since November, and I will be on this round till about July. So
We wish you the best on that.
I think I'm going to do well.
Now, you're going to have your own show here,
I am.
right? And it's going to be something to do with the haunted something or other.
Yes, and it's interesting that when I say I've met so many friends, I've met many friends, and then other people have met me, and a lot of it has been through the book. There was a following. I have a Facebook page, and I get out there as much as I can, and different events get promoted. And I found out a group of guys were doing some investigations based on my book, and they had formed their own paranorm investigation club, and it's called the New England Paranorm Investigators. And we started meeting and talking, and they had been out to a few of the places. In particular,
Did they get anything?
they did.
Good for you.
They did. They
Good.
did. At the Birchwood Inn, it was.
Really? Did they get scared and run or what?
They were out of their minds.
Oh my gosh.
They were at an inn, which is haunted. It's out in Temple, and we're going to be going out there again. The owners are wonderful, and it's in the book as a stop-off point when you're in Temple Mountain, because Temple Mountain also has its own mystery about it. But they stayed at the Birchwood Inn and got some good EVPs.
Yeah, we got one in Nashua now. I hear Fodes is pretty well.
Right.
We had them on the show, and he was talking about that at one point, and we said we ought to have Ghost Adventures come in. Well, now we'll have some local people go in there.
Yep, I think it's great to have a local group.
Yeah. That's quite a historical little building that's going that they're in. I guess they moved it from one spot. And,
yeah, the building moved across the street.
right.
We're working very closely with the National Historical Society. They've been very supportive of me all along, and I've done presentations with their group. And we're doing a lot of digging up of what happened with that building, as well as what happened to the building on Concord Street that is now known as the Red Cross Building, which also has its mysterious
Interesting.
guests.
Really?
Mysterious guests. We'll leave it at that.
Well, don't stay overnight there. That's all.
Yeah. So
Unless you have a
looking
flashlight.
forward to doing some local historical investigations, as well as the haunted investigation aspect of it. So it will be part history, part mystery, part investigation, and hopefully a lot of adventure and a lot of fun for local people to get out and see these places for themselves.
Now the book has ghosts. It has UFOs. It has Sasquatch. What else does it have?
We don't have any vampires or witches in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But there is one of my favorite tales in there is the story of Nancy Barton. And Nancy Barton died when she was 16. She was found frozen to death. And there's a whole legend that goes with Nancy Barton. And it's one of the places I've been back to many times because her grave is on the trailhead. So you can go, and she was buried right where her body was found. She was chasing her lover who had run off with her dowry money. They were supposed to be engaged. And there's this whole legend and aspect of Nancy Barton that lives on and on and on in Nancy Mountain. There's a whole scenic area named after her. There are the Nancy Cascades.
There's got to be songs too, I'm sure.
I don't know about songs, but I know that there's a poem, and Lucy Crawford wrote a brief poem about how totally tragic and awful her death was for that area of Crawford Notch for that time. It was during the Revolutionary War. And it was so tragic that they named this whole area after her. So I feel like her memory will always live on whenever you climb Mansi Mountain or go up the Cascades.
And that story's in this book.
That story's in the book.
Can they get this book on Amazon?
You can get it on Amazon through me directly. There's a few places in town that still carry the book. I have a distributor up north. It's a long story what happened with my publisher, but anyone looking for a book can find me. I have an email address, and I sell my
What's
book.
your email address if you don't?
hauntedhiker603@gmail.com.
And you're on Facebook?
And I'm on Facebook under Haunted Hikes and M.A. O'Connor. I go by M.A. for short. There's a lot of other Marianne O'Connors out there, so I have to distinguish myself a little bit.
Right.
So I go by M.A.
M.A., you got it.
That's been my nickname. And I always like to present and offer children books. And my deal when I've been working in the school system has always been, if you write me a story, you get a book.
Oh, nice.
And I still encourage children to write those stories. When I do presentations at school, they always vividly remember the story of George, which is supposed to be really one of the scariest stories in New Hampshire, and it's quite scary. And I have it on my flash drive with when I do my show. And it does frighten the daylights out of children. I mean, they scream, but they scream in a fun kind of way. They don't go away crying.
Right.
You know, they say, "Can you tell me that story again?"
Well, that's good.
So,
Yeah, that's great.
It's good, clean fun.
Well, thank you for coming on Gate City Chronicles.
Thank you so much for having us,
All right, and we
or
look
having
forward-
me. There's more than one of me, I guess.
Yeah, well, okay, hello. So we look forward to seeing your show.
Can't wait to do it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And thanks for joining us on Gate City Chronicles. Until next week, that's it for now. Thank you for watching Gate City Chronicles. And we want to thank our sponsor, Avard Dean of Clean, the carpet cleaner in Nashua. You can reach him at 603-630-1743. And if you would like some more information about Gate City Chronicles or want to be a guest, contact me at gatecitychronicles@gmail.com. Until next week, thanks for watching.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.